There we go. So you probably see a pop-up that says we are recording now. My name is Jamie Viebach, and I'm the Will County Director with the Conservation Foundation. I want to welcome you all to our latest in our webinar series today, Healthy Streams, Healthy Communities. And just so you know, everyone is muted, your cameras are off. So if you're joining us in your pajamas, or maybe you're in a ball gown because you just felt like it today, I don't know. But we can't see you, so that's all good. This webinar is being recorded, as I mentioned, so that you can enjoy it later. If you want to direct friends to it later, it's going to be on our YouTube channel, and I'll throw that link in the chat here in just a little bit. If you have a question, please use the Q&A box. That lets everybody see your question. It also makes it easier for us to find them at the end. We will answer questions at the end, so as things are going on, feel free to drop your question there in that Q&A box. For your safety, you should only be able to see what I post in chat, but just in case something doesn't work, please don't click any links other than what I may post in chat. On the TCF side of things, these webinars are offered to the public for free, but we do encourage you to consider a donation or a membership if you're not a member already. The more people we have attending, the more it does cost us to run them. And at the end of the webinar, you'll be taken to a page with a whole bunch of resources of things you might be interested in, including our virtual tip jar. So if you're enjoying these webinars, I do encourage you to donate to help keep us running. As I've mentioned before, we have been given the go-ahead to continue doing these webinars. As some of you may know, we started doing this when the whole stay-at-home order started, just as a way for us to keep in contact with everybody and to continue to spread our message of native plants and conservation and all those good things. So if you are enjoying these, I do encourage you to help keep us running. It also makes you a member so that you can enjoy our wide variety of other members-only stuff. As I mentioned, this is a series, so we've been going every Monday and Thursday so far. So Thursday's webinar is going to be Native Landscape Design with TCF staffer Nancy Sonatl. As I've mentioned before, I am not an artist and I do not know design at all, but Nancy does. And she's going to share some design ideas with you. So next week, I will actually be out of town, so big shout out to Jim and Jan, who are going to be taking over webinars for me while I am gone. So Monday on June 22nd, we will have another Conservation at Home discussion with Jim Kleinwachter, our Conservation at Home guru at TCF. So those of you who may have seen him in the webinar he did on native landscaping solutions to problems, he is going to be back with more Conservation at Home talk. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Jennifer Hammer. Jennifer, are you there? There she is.
There we go.
All right, welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you.
I am going to shut off my camera and let you take it away.
All right, let's see. Cool. And I assume my screen is up. So thank you, Jamie, for inviting me to come and talk about healthy streams and healthy communities. I'm the Director of Watershed Programs at the Conservation Foundation. I've been working on watershed and river related issues for over 20 years now. Definitely enjoy the work that I do and the work that I'm able to kind of further along with the different projects and programs that we do at the Conservation Foundation. So I know Jamie has covered kind of some of this introductory stuff each time, but I know we get different viewers, new viewers. So the Conservation Foundation has been around for nearly 50 years, preserving and protecting land and water, graciously supported by donors like you. As Jamie said, we're a nonprofit organization supported by members. And if you do enjoy what you're seeing here today, please do follow that link and become a member and support all the work that we do across our region. The Conservation Foundation is also recognized as an accredited land trust by the Land Trust Alliance Accreditation Commission. This may not mean much to sort of the general visitor to our website, but to those who we work with doing conservation easements and other land purchases and things like that. like that, and people who we might get grants from, that really just a responsible way of doing our business. So we're very proud of that accreditation. So we work mostly in DuPage, King, Kendall, and Will counties. With kind of that as our central focus, we do some land preservation work and other land activities in DeKalb, LaSalle, and Grundle counties. And most of us, when we are in the office, are headquartered out of our McDonald Farm location in the south end of Naperville. So we've been busy, even over the last few months of us all working from home. We have just a ton of work to do with conservation in our region. We're always getting calls and emails about new projects, working with private and public landowners. In this case here on the map shows you the work that we've done with conservation easements, purchasing through fee simple, and different ways to support our open space referenda in the counties that we work in. What does open space mean to you? I think especially over the last few months, having access to open space has been incredibly important to both our physical and mental health, as well as just the overall quality of life. And the work that we do, there's really that sort of fine line between water and land, and you can't have one without the other, and they both impact each other. And so a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about today is that interaction and how the things that we do on the land affect the water, and that can be both in good and bad ways. But by preserving these open spaces and protecting wildlife habitat, these are not only good for the bugs and the bunnies, but it's good for us people as well. So kind of jumping into the watershed side of things, the Conservation Foundation has been active in watershed planning, education and outreach, and staffing for over 20 years. Each of the watersheds that we work in have their own needs, have their own stakeholders. They're all different in their own way. And we've really tried to tailor our approach to meet those needs in the different watersheds. So we provide leadership through technical and support staffing to 3 separate nonprofit watershed groups, the DuPage River Salt Creek Work Group, the Lower DuPage River Watershed Coalition, the Lower Des Plaines Watershed Group. And then we also work in the Fox River Watershed, really in just a different way, because there's other groups that are kind of taking the lead on some of the things like these other 3 watershed groups that I just mentioned. And so we work with them in support roles and help to coordinate wherever there's gaps. So as we go through the presentations today, and I'm going to talk about some different monitoring programs or restoration projects, and really the credit for those programs and projects goes to the watershed organizations that I just mentioned, as they've really made huge strides to change how we approach water quality issues. So I'm gonna kind of step back a little bit and really step back to the beginning in what a watershed is, not fully knowing what everybody's background is. I wanna make sure that we're not leaving anybody behind as we talk about watersheds and water quality. And so really simply put, the watershed is just an area of land that drains into a particular body of water. This could be a stream, a lake, or a wetland. And the size of the watershed is, really just comes down to scale. So you could be a part of the Springbrook Creek watershed, which is on the southwest side of Naperville. This middle portion of it goes through the Springbrook Prairie Nature or Springbrook Forest Preserve. And Springbrook drains into the lower Des Plaines. So I have an arrow there showing where Springbrook Creek comes into the main stem Lower DuPage River watershed. And the Lower DuPage River watershed, Lower DuPage River, flows downstream through all of these communities and down to Channahon, where it joins the Lower Des Plaines. So you see the blue arrow there, and that's where the DuPage River is coming into the Des Plaines River. And that's right above where the Des Plaines River and the Kankakee River come together to form the Illinois River. So you can kind of see there at the beginning of the blue line, that is right where the Des Plaines River and Kankakee join. And then the Illinois River gets bigger and bigger as other streams like the Fox and the Rock River come into it. And it winds its way down to Alton, Illinois, where it becomes a part of the Mississippi River. And looking at the Mississippi River watershed, that's pretty much all that pink area, that's sort of a little bit lighter pink, which really is drains almost half of the United States. And the Mississippi River goes down to the Gulf of Mexico. So again, when we're talking about watersheds, it could be as small as the little drainage way that leads to the little creek that runs behind your house, or to a little wetland, or something up to the size of the Mississippi River. Let's see. So if we scale back to your backyard or to your front yard, that drains into the nearest small creek, we can see how what we do on the land has impacts all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. So the things that wash off of our landscape, whether it's coming across your grass, down your driveway, down the storm sewer, the water flows downstream and downslope and down to the nearest water body. So those pollutants, even though you may not think much about the dog poop left on the lawn or the excess fertilizer that's on your driveway or the oil that leaked out of your car, eventually all of that stuff ends up down the storm sewer, down that nearest creek and downstream. So what makes a healthy stream? I'm going to read this just because I want you to think about it as you hear the words. I'm going to read what is sort of my personal description of a healthy stream. So while I'm doing this, think about your favorite little stream, whether it's somewhere local or somewhere where you go on vacation. But just kind of listen and picture these things in your mind. So healthy streams are full of life: fish, aquatic bugs, plants, clean water, good habitat for those fish and bugs to make their homes in. Healthy streams are well vegetated, have well vegetated riparian land along them. It helps to filter out pollutants, the rainwater draining towards the river, that come with rainwater draining towards the river. They help to shade those smaller streams, and they provide a habitat for wildlife. They're inviting places to explore, kayak down, fish, or maybe just a quiet place to sit and listen to the water flowing over the rocks. So I want you to keep these things in mind as we talk through what makes a healthy stream. So how do we measure health? It's done in a number of different ways, and locally, this work is being done by the 3 watershed groups I mentioned earlier: the DuPage River Salt Creek Work Group, Lower DuPage River Watershed Coalition, the Lower Des Plaines Watershed Group, and there are others within the Fox River, within the upper part of the Des Plaines, so other groups that are doing similar type work. And in particular, these groups do bioassessment program where they're collecting data from different streams each year and then cycling back around to those streams every 3 to 5 years to be able to identify stressors to aquatic life and to track changes over time. So within those programs, they're doing fish, macrovertebrates, habitat, water, and sediment. The vegetation and algae is a kind of a new component that's being looked at. So this information, though, is being collected and put together both within the sub-watershed reach as well as the larger watershed scales. And because several of these groups are doing the same type of monitoring, we're also being able to look across some of the larger watershed areas. And this is important because for the most part, our urban area, suburban area around Chicago is very similar. And so things that we learn in one watershed, we may be able to apply to some of the other watersheds that we work in. So we're gonna sidetrack a little bit into how streams function, both in structure and what lives there, so that when we go back to talking about monitoring or impacts, we'll have a little bit better understanding of what these things tell us about the stream. So the USGS, US Geological Survey, tells us that stream ecology is the study of the aquatic species and the way that they interrelate and their interactions with all aspects of the flowing water systems. So it's that combination of structure and structure, which is the habitat, flow, as well as then the biology, the fish, the bugs, the plants, how all of those things interact. So I kind of broke it up into two sections. So we're going to talk about structure first and then aquatic life next. So natural stream channels curve back and forth, carving out on the outside bends, depositing material on the inside bends. This is the way that they dissipate energy. In the riparian corridor, or that kind of area of land on either side of the stream, which also would include the floodplain, is another place where water can safely come out of its banks to further dissipate energy. So those are really important components of kind of stream structure on the large scale. So the channel, the riparian areas, the floodplains. Within these channels, there should be riffles, which are areas that have rocks and a little bit steeper slope. The water is a little faster, and there's different critters that like those types of areas. And as water comes out of the riffles, they generally flow into what's called runs, which are flat water areas. So when you're out looking at the stream, you can kind of see where the riffles are because the water is sort of bubbling and rushing around the rocks, and the runs are nice and flat. And pools, there are those deep spots, usually around a bend, but not always. And those are areas that really provide some great components, both in the summer months as well as in the colder months. So in the summertime, when the stream flow is low and it's warm, those pools provide areas for fish to go hang out in, where the water might be a little bit cooler. And in the winter, those areas can be really important, as if the surface areas freeze over, there's places where the fish can get down into and hunker down over the winter. You have rocks and logs along the edges of the water, push flow towards the middle, and then they form eddies along the sides where the water kind of swirls around in reverse of the current. And all of these different places provide different types of habitat for fish and bugs. So when we're doing the assessment of in-stream habitat, and when we do it through the bioassessment programs, we use a system called QHEI, and it's the Qualitative Habitat Evaluation Index. It's kind of one fancy term there for really breaking down habitat into different areas, and then within each area, looking at kind of subcomponents of that area. So substrate, sort of what's on the bottom of the stream, for example. And what does that substrate look like? Is it mostly mud? Is there a mix of sand or gravel, cobble, which is just sort of bigger rocks, and then boulders being even bigger rocks? What's the combination of those? How much sediment is covering the gravel? So there's different scores that are done for each of these. And they look at things like flow. Is there a diversity of flow? Are there areas where the water is moving faster, like through the riffles or around eddies? Or is it very uniform across the width of the stream? We look at stream flashiness. So as I'm sure you've seen, when it rains, like we had a couple weeks ago, we had the big rain, how quickly the water goes up in the streams, and then relatively quickly how the water comes back down. That flashiness can impact streams in just the stability of the stream banks and erosion, which again then leads into this next section. Are the stream banks stable? Is there a lot of erosion going on? Are the banks undercut with tree roots, which can be a good thing because that provides habitat for fish to get away from predators or to hang out where it might be a little bit cooler. But if the erosion is too great, it can destabilize those trees and they fall in. So again, there's this balance. But as we go through and do the habitat evaluation, each of these factors is related to the needs of aquatic life. So we look at all of these things because each of these things individually are important to either different groups of fish or different groups of bugs. And so the more we know about these different areas of habitat, that can help us as we look for ways to improve habitat to support different fish or bug communities. So I threw up a bunch of pictures that I've taken over the years of different streams in our area, just to kind of give you an idea of some different habitat or stream corridor areas. Being in the Midwest, we have relatively flat streams, so no big waterfalls, or at least very few of them naturally. But we have these prairie stream systems, but they still do have gradients, so we still do get these riffles and pools and run areas. And so the goal of habitat assessment is to determine what level of aquatic life can be supported in a particular segment of stream. And the diversity of structure drives the diversity of flow, which in turn drives the diversity of aquatic life. So, we look at these things individually because then as it gets tied back to the ecology of or natural history of different species. So if we have, gravel in the stream, but it's all covered by silt, then there may be no good places for fish or insects to lay their eggs. Or if there are no riffles, then maybe there's no good places for fish like darters to hang out and catch their food because they like those fast water areas. And without deep pools, there may be no place to find refuge when the river freezes in the winter. So all of these different habitat components have correlations to different aspects of aquatic life. So as we talk about structure, we really kind of think about how that structure gets impacted by the development and things that we've done to our waterways. So even though our watersheds may have hundreds of miles of stream length going from the small drainage ditch to the creek to the river, there are many obstacles for fish that are trying to move upstream. Many of our fish in the Midwest are smaller and they're weaker swimmers than their salmonid cousins that we've seen pictures of jumping up over, whether it be dams or waterfalls on the east and west coast. So even things like culverts for bridge crossings can stop the movement of fish, small fish in particular. So if you look at the picture that's there on the bottom right, you can see during low flow conditions, there's that lip at the end of the culvert kind of apron there. And fish can't move back upstream because the water is flowing so low. There's a thin sheet of water going through the bottom of the culvert, and there's no way for fish to move back up. And then when there is enough water there, the water more than likely is moving too fast for our small fish to move back up through those areas. So even things like road culverts can really fragment our stream habitats. The more obvious dams, when we think about fragmentation of things that stop fish, that dams come out as a much more obvious thing that blocks that passage. And generally with dams, many of our dams block most, if not all, species from moving upstream. So through years of development and pollution and other impacts to areas upstream, once we lose fish from a particular stretch upstream, if there's a dam in the way, there's really no way for those fish to get back upstream to recolonize an area. So jumping over to the aquatic life side of stream ecology, a complete food web supports a diversity of aquatic life. And what I mean by complete is, does it have sort of all of these steps in the food web, looking, from algae to plants, algae and plants to zooplankton that feeds on that algae and plants to macroinvertebrates that either feed on zooplankton or the plants themselves, and then the macroinvertebrates that eat other macroinvertebrates, the fish that eat the macroinvertebrates, fish that eat other fish, and so on up the food chain. And really, if we're missing different pieces of that, we're missing parts of either the fish or bug assemblage, and that really can impact how our streams are scored and whether or not they're actually supporting the aquatic life that they should be. So with most of the biological assessments that are done here in the region by the watershed groups, as well as by the state of Illinois and the Department of, through the Environmental Protection Agency or Department of Natural Resources, fish and bugs are the two main groups of critters that are looked at as we score streams and score stream health. And so looking at, and the reason for that is there's been a lot more study on these, like what makes up a good healthy fish community. Does it have fish that eat plants and fish that eat bugs and fish that eat other fish or fish that eat both? You know, having all of those different kinds of assemblages, and then the same thing with the macroinvertebrates. And we also have a pretty good understanding about how pollution impacts different types of fish or different types of macroinvertebrates, those insects that live in the stream. And so some, like with macroinvertebrates, there are some that are very tolerant to pollution and can live in, you know, pools of water that have hardly any oxygen in them. And then we have other, kind of at the other end of the spectrum, we have insects that require, that are very intolerant to pollution, require very clean water with lots of oxygen and very specific habitat needs. And so we're able to score those different insects. And then when we look at the whole assemblage of what's there, we're able to put a score on the stream. And then we have a way of knowing, is this stream meeting its aquatic life use for fish? Is it meeting it for bugs? And if it's meeting it for both, you know, then we're hitting our water quality goals as far as the Clean Water Act is concerned. But mussels are another area where there's been a whole lot of study being done, both within the state as well as nationally through the US EPA and the USGS Geological Survey, to look at mussels because they're really finding that many mussels are even more sensitive to pollution than other fish and macroinvertebrates. And so mussels can really tell us even more. And we need to know that are they different pollutant standards that we have set for streams for discharges, are those protective of mussels? And so there's a lot of that new information that's been coming out. And the other really interesting thing with mussels is that they depend on fish for part of their life cycle. This is something that is really cool. And if you look up on YouTube for mussel reproduction, freshwater mussel reproduction, there's some really cool videos of this. But freshwater mussels really depend on fish for their first life stage. So once the female mussel has fertilized eggs, essentially the larvae, she waits for a fish to come along so she can shoot these glochidia into their gills. Well, it's a little difficult to just wait for a fish to come along, so different mussels have evolved different ways to attract fish. And so you can look at the picture there of the mussel on the left, and what looks like a little fish on the top of it is actually the fleshy part of the mussel. They have a little lure that looks like a fish to attract bigger fish to come in and check it out. And when the fish comes in and kind of takes the bait, the mussel will shoot the glochidia out, and the fish and they get attached to the gills. And so you can see in the picture of the glochidia, they're kind of like open shells. They're tiny, and they will clamp onto the fish gill. And they're kind of semi-parasitic at that point where they're getting their nutrients from the fish, but they only hang on for a couple of weeks, and then they'll drop off and start their new life as a mussel. So the thing with that is that some mussels are very specific as to which fish host they use. So they may only use one particular fish host, and other mussels will use many different fish. But if the fish can't move upstream because there is a dam in the way or a culvert in the way, this also stops mussels from being able to move upstream and colonize new habitat. But like I said, if you get it through structure, and we made it through the stuff that lives in the water, and now we're going to transition into the water itself and how what's in the water affects aquatic life. So is that water clean? And here, clean is a relative thing because water can look clear but not really be clean. or water can be somewhat cloudy, but maybe not be too bad. But there's a lot of things that are in water that we can't physically see. So there's, when we do our assessments, when we're out there collecting fish and bug samples, we're also collecting water chemistry samples, and we send those to the lab and then bring that information back and to have a better understanding of, are there too much of a particular type of pollutant that's in the water. And those pollutants can affect aquatic life in many different ways. Some of them can reduce the amount of dissolved oxygen that's available for fish and bugs. Other ones can impact different parts of the life cycle of fish and bugs. And many of these pollutants come to our streams carried either through stormwater as it flows across our landscape or across construction sites, as well as through industrial discharges or wastewater treatment plants. And you can see I just sort of put up some representative types of pollutants that we have coming into our streams. So, looking at different fertilizers that we apply, whether it's to lawns or farm fields, things that come off of our vehicles, just trash in general, road salt, sediment. So even though sediment is, it's soil, it's natural, but you don't want it piling up in our streams. And another part of the water quality side of things, or the chemistry side of things, is nutrients. And you probably heard about nutrients being a big problem in the Gulf of Mexico and the dead zone that's down there. And really, nationally, nutrients is one of the largest water quality problems that we have out there, so excess nutrients. And this is a really complex topic, so I'm really just going to skim the surface on this. I think we could do a whole webinar or more on impacts of nutrients, but we're going to go with the really short cliff notes here. So excess nutrients come from fertilizers, wastewater treatment plants, basically any kind of human or animal waste, and then organic debris. Healthy streams can process nutrients efficiently. But the problem is that many of our actions on the land dump excess amounts of nutrients onto our already stressed streams. And so because most of our urban streams have various issues, whether it's lack of habitat or other chemical pollutants coming into them, that level of excess nutrients coming into the streams could be problematic, that the stream can't handle that on its own. And so some of the problems that those excess nutrients cause is just like how fertilizer makes your grass grow and grow strong and green, does the same thing for algae and other aquatic plants. And so when there's too many nutrients in the water, that could really impact the amount of algae that we have growing in our streams. And that causes its own set of problems. So excess nutrients kind of disrupt that natural nutrient cycling program or cycle. And so as we have more algae growing, it can affect the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water, because just like plants on land, they photosynthesize during the day, so they're taking oxygen in, and at night they're respiring and putting oxygen out. So we can get these, it's the other way around. Photosynthesizing puts oxygen out, respiring takes oxygen back into the plants. And so we get these really big swings where we could have really high dissolved oxygen levels in the late afternoon. And then, before sunrise, those oxygen levels could plummet to close to zero. And that can be really stressful on fish. Also, when you have large amounts of algae and as it dies at different times of the year, that decomposition from that algae can also suck oxygen out. And so it really just puts a lot of stress on stream systems. And different streams react in different ways, which is also kind of one of the issues or bigger problems around kind of dealing with nutrients, is that there's no one clear answer, depending on the stream type, what kind of background levels are, the health of the stream, there's no one good answer for how much nutrient is the right amount of nutrients in the water. You can't apply it like statewide. So we're collecting information on this to be able to figure out for our local watersheds, really what is the target, where should we be at? One of the other issues outside of kind of that chemistry side of nutrients is that excess algae in streams and lakes can impact recreational activities as well, so like swimming or fishing. So as we put all of these things together, part of the goal of the bioassessment monitoring program is to take all of this data as well as some of the other information that we have on land use and access to open spaces, and put that information together to really drive what the biggest stressors are to aquatic life. So the more roads there are in a subwatershed, the more storm sewers there are, the more stormwater pollution is getting to the streams, or the more salt that's going to make it into the streams. And so as we take that information and pair it with the data that we collect, we're able to really look at all of the different parts of the picture that impact our fish. And so, do we really just want our fish and bugs to be surviving, or do we want them to thrive? Because all of these things, when we look at them together, it's the physical health of the fish, how well are they able to reproduce, and fish or bugs in this case, but are they able to successfully reproduce? Are they growing well? Do they have other like sores on them, or are there barbels missing on the catfish? All of these things really tie back to what's happening on the land and how that's impacting the water. So when I am asked about water quality, I really like to kind of step back and talk about it as the combination of the three components that we have been talking about so far. The chemistry, or the pollutant levels in the water, the habitat structure, and the biology, the habitat structure, and then the biology, basically all the things that are living in the water. So, when we put all of these three things together, you really kind of have a better understanding about whether or not the stream is healthy. And if it isn't, what do we need to do to fix it? So, you can think about like an empty fish tank. And if you fill it up with, water out of your tap, so drinking water, water is really clean, but without any structure, you can put fish in there, but they're not going to be very happy. They're not going to have any place to hide. They're not going to have any place to lay their eggs. So it's not really going to result in a healthy stream system. You could have a stream that has really good habitat, riffles and pools and really nice substrate, but if the water has some toxic chemical in it, you're not going to support much life. And so really we need to look at water quality as being this balance between clean water, good habitat, and then a healthy assemblage of macroinvertebrates and fish and plants and mussels. And when we have all of those things together, then that's really what our goal is for clean water or good water quality or a healthy stream. So it's really all three of those pieces together. And this is really important as we look at stream restoration or trying to preserve and protect our streams, because in most cases when people talk about water quality, it's just about the chemistry. And that has really led us down this road of only looking at whether streams, whether the water quality number is being met. So is there so many milligrams per liter of some particular component in the water? And if there's, if it's below that number, it's good. If it's above that number, it's bad. But as we look at all those things individually, we're not seeing the whole picture. And if we ignore habitat, which we don't generally have scores are as far as water quality standards go, then we're never going to get to the point of having a good, healthy stream. So now that we know a little bit more about how healthy streams function, I hope it's a little easier to understand how or why our local streams are impacted by what we do on the land, good or bad. So we have a little bit better understanding that dams block fish. They also impound water behind them, and because that water slows down, sediment builds up, and sediment can cover the rocks. So now we don't have good places for fish to find food because bugs aren't living there. So there's a number of impacts that go along with dams. And channelization. We have several of our urban streams that are really straight. I know I can stand at Warrenville Road and look down the east branch of the DuPage River, and it is a straight shot for quite some ways as it goes through different parts of Lyle and Woodridge. And that's been a legacy of channelization in our region. And so that channelization, that straightening of stream, it damages habitat. It makes just really uniform habitat and flow, which again really doesn't support much diversity than in aquatic life. Stormwater is a big one because it's both that quantity and quality. So the amount of stormwater that gets to our streams that causes that flashiness, that fast up and down, that impacts our stream banks, causes erosion, as well as some of the different flooding issues that we have. And then the quality, what is all that stormwater carrying with it? Kind of hit on some of the impacts from nutrients and then just overall pollution. So those things that come along with the stormwater coming into our streams. So trying to kind of get to the wrap up of things of how the things that we do impact our waterways. And so what can you do? So I want you to think back to sort of my personal description or vision of what a healthy stream is, and think about how the things that we do impact those different components. We all have a part to play to be responsible watershed residents. And if we can all make even small changes and build on them as we learn more, we really can make a difference in our local streams. And you may think that, well, what's one rain barrel going to do, or a couple of native plants in my yard? It's not just the individual, it's the collective. And as we all move towards some of these different practices, it will add up in the end. And some of these things, it's not even just the physical action of it, but as we do these things, we have a better understanding. So how quickly does that rain barrel fill up? It really starts to make you think about how much rain comes off of your roof, and where all that rain goes to, and clearing out storm sewers, when the leaves are all piled up. And so those little actions really help us understand more and see how the things that we do can have impacts, again, both positive and negative. So really what it comes down to is clean these and what lives in our streams to land. So again, kind of getting into the different things that you can do. One of the first things, which is there's a lot of different projects going on within our region, and to support both your community or your local forest preserve district on their ongoing restoration efforts, including dam removals, stream habitat restoration projects, putting in native buffers, whether it's along streams or around detention basins, and the ongoing ecological management activities to keep these places healthy. These things are just incredibly important to the long-term health of our streams. So when open space referenda come up that support restoration, when a project is up talking about the removal of a dam, take the time to educate yourself about the project and learn the pros and cons of what that project is going to do, and then support your local agencies for the work that they're doing, because these projects make the water cleaner and healthier for all of us to enjoy. So there's many ways that we can reduce our environmental impacts, both at home and at work. I know that Jamie has done a number of webinars on various components of our Conservation at Home program. So I'm going to just highlight a few, and you can go back to the YouTube channel and check out the different webinars that she's done, and the information that's on our website. But you know, some of the, I imagine that many of these things you've either heard about or seen in different ways. I'm going to highlight as to sort of what some tips and things that you can do and how they impact water quality. And one of the newer things, really kind of in light of COVID, as more people are obviously washing their hands a lot more, hopefully, and using disinfectants and things like that, is to, you know, kind of think about the stress that that puts on our water systems. And some really important things there is the things like those like hand wipes or other wipes. Even if they say they're flushable, they really aren't. So don't put them down the toilet or down the drain in any way, because it causes all kinds of problems for wastewater treatment plants. And you know, think about the different cleaning supplies that you're using and what their impacts may be on water quality, because many of those things, our wastewater treatment plants are really not designed to remove. So caring for your yard. I know this is a big component of the Conservation at Home program. We talk about it a lot in our education and outreach efforts with our watershed groups. But some things to think about as we're really high into the season of cutting grass and taking care of the yard, is to keep it high. Really think about not mowing any more than a third of your grass's height. By doing that, you help the grass be able to not dry out as quickly and outcompete weeds, so that you're not so dependent on other means of trying to remove weeds from your lawn. And speaking of weeds in the lawn, you know, be a little tolerant. So not everything in your lawn necessarily has to be grass. There is place for clover and other things that you know, actually provide a lot of other benefits to our pollinators. And honestly, the lawn is much greener that way, because you have all these other plants that have maybe a little bit deeper roots or can handle different situations. And so even as your grass might be going a little bit dormant while it's really hot during the summer, there's other plants in the lawn to keep it green. Use a mulching mower to naturally fertilize your lawn. So mulching mowers break up the grass clippings into much smaller pieces, so they can kind of filter down into the grass and add food to the soil. The other thing too is just, you may need to mow a little more often, especially at the early part of summer, and then later and kind of getting into fall. We're usually mowing our grass usually not quite twice a week, because if it gets too long, then you're dealing with you know, those grass clippings that can become a problem and make it a little bit harder. Especially we have electric mowers, so the mowing it a little more often, it definitely makes it a little easier on the mower. If you are going to use fertilizers, make sure you follow their direction. In this case, more is definitely not better, even with things that are, you know, considered natural fertilizers. So, you know, you want to make sure you follow label directions. Think about when you're applying them, so you're not applying it right before you're going to be a big rainstorm. It's going to wash it all off. And if you do get you know, those fertilizer granules onto your driveway or onto the sidewalk, make sure you sweep them up and either save them for later or put them up into the lawn, because the next time it rains, it's just going to wash all of that right down the storm sewer and down to the river. So I know we're still in summer, but as we think ahead to fall, leaves are just a part of autumn, and depending on how many trees you have in your yard or your neighborhood will really drive how you deal with them. So if you don't have a lot of trees, you're in a newer subdivision, just mulching them into your lawn with your mower would work just fine. When you have more trees and therefore more leaves, you'll probably need to collect them. And that may be using them to mulch flower beds or your garden, which really using your mower to break them down first before you put them into your flower beds or garden. Really helps them kind of break down a little quicker so it's ready come springtime. Or you may need to rake them and put them out for municipal collection, whether that's bags or raking it to the curb. The big thing here, the big kind of takeaway for this is to keep leaves out of the streets. They clog storm drains. When it rains and the water kind of goes through the leaves, it's just like tea, and dissolved phosphorus leaches out of the leaves, and it's a big source of phosphorus getting into our streams in the fall. So the more that you can do to keep them out of the street and sweep them out of blocking the storm sewers, and then especially not piling them up anywhere near our streams or waterways. So even though we think about leaves and grass clippings as things that are natural, they overwhelm our stream systems. Our streams are not meant to have those large inputs, especially all at once, of nutrients like that. So keeping them out of the streams, away from waterways. Don't pile up don't put your compost pile, right next to the stream that's in your backyard. Things like that. And by keeping our storm sewers clear, we are also able to help with potentially with some localized flooding issues, because when those storm sewers get blocked up, the water has no place to go. So I know Jamie talks a lot about this, and it really is key to use rain as a resource. We are really lucky within our region that the amount of water that we get, amount of rain that we get versus some of the drier areas out west or in the south. And so to really use that water as a resource. And really, what's the difference between rainwater and stormwater? I think it's all perspective. Rainwater is a resource to be valued. But when you say stormwater, it's mostly something that people think that we need to get rid of. So why not look for ways to use it as a resource, to use that as your perspective? And so whether it's utilizing rain barrels to collect water for later, or installing a rain garden, look for ways that you can keep that rainwater where it falls. Putting in native plants, shrubs, and trees that can help infiltrate that water into the ground. Disconnecting your downspouts so that they're not draining directly onto a hard surface like a driveway or a sidewalk. Get it directed to the lawn where it can soak in. And as we keep talking about rainwater and stormwater, to think about the fact that in most of the suburban areas around Chicago, our storm sewers are separated from the sanitary sewers. So that means that the water that goes down the storm drain goes directly to whatever the closest stream is. It's not cleaned up or filtered in any way. So really anything that goes down that drain goes right into the stream. So whether that's oil from our cars, excess fertilizer or road salt, trash, all of that right into the streams. So again, when we keep these storm drains clear of trash and debris, not only are we keeping these pollutants out of the stream, we're also helping to keep water from backing up around a clogged storm drain and reduce those street flooding that can happen locally. And after fall comes winter, and I know we're still in the middle, not quite summer yet, but thinking ahead to road salt. It is a huge issue in our region and really anywhere where they get any kind of snowfall. But snow is just another form of stormwater, and when it melts, it carries all that road salt down to the river, where it causes all kinds of problems for aquatic life. And the thing is it's not just there, it doesn't just stay there in the winter. So the salt doesn't break down, it dissolves into water and it kind of hangs around. And because it's the way we put it on the roads, and it gets plowed off onto the land next to the roads, and it slowly, we'll get big spikes of it washing into the rivers in the winter. But as it rains through spring and early summer, there's still salt that's on the sides of the roads or in detention basins or in storm sewers that gets flushed out for many weeks, if not months, into our streams. And it's in that spring time of year when fish are laying eggs and there's baby fish and baby macroinvertebrates. And it's that young of the year stage that the amounts of chloride or salt in the water that's really detrimental. So the less salt we can put down in the winter, the better it'll be for those critters in the spring. And when we talk about using less salt, it really comes down to we use way more salt than is necessary to keep our roads and sidewalks clear or safe. So we're not asking you to not be safe, not deal with the ice when necessary. It's just to think about different ways that you can reduce the amount of salt you use. And one of the first things is to always make sure you shovel first. You should not be using salt to melt your snow. So if you shovel first and then apply your salt and apply it sparingly, so like it should never be clumped up, it should be nicely spread out. And if after a snowstorm comes and goes and the ice melts, and if there's still a bunch of salt on your sidewalk, you've used too much, because then that salt basically was wasted. There was more of it than was necessary. So you can actually sweep that salt up and use it again later. But then really think, the next time around to use less salt and only use it where you need it. Does it need to be across your entire driveway, or is it really like where you walk to get into your cars, or not your cars, or to get into the house? So look for ways that you might be able to reduce it. And then also, salt doesn't work when it's below 15 degrees. And so you really need to look at some of the other de-icers that are available out there for those cold temperatures. So I think that's the end of the tips that I had and kind of how all of these things play together. And I'm going to kind of throw it back to Jamie to see what kind of questions that we might have.
All right. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free. Use that Q&A box down there at the bottom or put them in the chat. We're a smaller group today, so chat's not flying like it does sometimes. I will say, though, thank you, Gary. Gary says, great explanations, clear and comprehensive presentation, especially the yard section. So thank you for that, Jennifer. That was very, very informative. But I'm not seeing any questions at the moment. But I just want to thank everybody for tuning in and invite you back on Thursday when we talk about native plant landscaping design with Nancy. And if there's any topics you'd like us to cover in these webinars, please go ahead and send me an email. I'd love to hear some suggestions, what you guys want to hear about as we continue doing these. I'm just throwing topics out there, mostly things I'm interested in. So if you have something that you're dying to learn more about, send me an email. Let me know what you want to hear about. So as I said, I'm putting the July schedule together now. We have some really great guest speakers coming up and some really cool topics, I think. So let me know how we can help educate you. All right. Thank you again, Jennifer, so much, and great job today. And hopefully we will see you all back again on Thursday. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.